Welcome, it's time once again for another tutorial video. Today we are going to be doing two tutorials. So first off, we're going to be learning how to correct a life cast. Talk about that obviously when we get to it, and then we're going to be teaching you guys how to make a matrix mold. So because correcting a life cast isn't really, it's not real, I don't think it's worthy of a whole video. It's fairly simple and doesn't take long. So I'm doing the matrix mold one because I've got to mold it today. So I'm going to do a matrix mold, and I'm going to split it into two videos so that it's easy to find, because I don't want you to have to fast forward through all of the first part if you want to recap on how to make a matrix mold. So I'm going to split it into two, but I'll post them both at the same time so that the month that, obviously this month there are two videos. So let's get started on this. So here's our face that we're going to be correcting, and this is actually made out of 1630. It's a cord that I use often for sculpting generic prosthetics, but it's something that I always have a problem with because if you look under here, you can see how the jaw actually curves underneath on this side, curves underneath on this side, which means that I can only take my sculpt back as far as this ridge here before it starts curving under and creating what's called an undercut. So we're going to talk a little bit about undercuts briefly in a moment, but when you correct your life cast, you need to be aware of all of the different undercuts that are on the face. There are areas that can cause problems. This little area under the eye here, although typically it's not technically an undercut, it can still catch and break off sections of your mold. There are undercuts here under the nostrils where it curves in, and that will lock your mold in. There's this area in the lips, which again, not technically an undercut, but it's just an area that can cause problems for you with your sculpts when you're doing it. And then there's this area here on the bottom which is open, which I also want to get rid of. So that's what we're going to be correcting today, and then we'll be molding it so that I can pull as many corrected life casts using 1630. Now if you're doing this from a hydrocal or an ultracal life cast, it's exactly the same thing. The only thing that I would recommend doing is maybe getting some crystal clear and sealing your clay or your cement stone well before you start putting clay into it. It'll just make it easier for you. So let's talk about undercuts for a moment. Anytime you're going to be molding with rigid materials, it's going to be something that you need to consider. So if I had something that was round, okay, and I wanted to say this was made out of something hard. It's like a cylinder, like a neck or an arm, those types of things. And we'll talk more about this in tutorials where we're covering multiple piece molds. But if I was to split the mold here, okay, you would see that the halfway point is sort of here. So now this part here is more narrow than the opening on both of these, which means this side will come off easily, but this side is what's called an undercut. And that's probably the most simple undercut, is just a circle. But when you're talking about faces, if I was to take my core and cut it straight through here, okay, and look at it on the side, it would look something like this. And then we've got the nose shape here. Okay, so, and then this kind of curves in here like we talked about under the jawline. Okay, so that's our core, and then there's the handle here. So if I was to sculpt a nose tip, okay, do it here. We have our cutting edge, which we talked about, remember, on a 45. It would be fine if the runoff kind of went here, okay, because then this is all going to be in the runoff and there's no undercut. But if you were to sculpt it to just under like here, so it just wraps slightly under, and then put your cutting edge here, now this is wider than the opening we're going to have. So this is going to bust off here. You're going to lose your cutting edge because it's going to wrap underneath. Anywhere where it wraps underneath and locks the negative mold into your positive is an undercut. Same as here. If we were to sculpt a face and sculpt it all the way down around here and put your cutting edge here, now we've locked our mold in, and it could be even just right here. You can see how that just dips in just slightly. That's going to cause an undercut, which is going to cause problems, going to lock our mold in, and the only way to open it if you've got a locked in mold is to break it, is to break one of the molds, either to sort of chisel away part of your positive or crack your negative, and neither one make for a great alternative, because if we were to chisel this away so that our core could open, then our cutting edge is gone. So it causes a lot of problems. So we want to make sure that we're getting rid of and eliminating any undercuts. And the way we do that is just by claying in. So we'll put some clay in here under the nostrils, and we'll basically just bring some clay and just take this all the way down like that, so that there is nothing, all of the surfaces are facing upwards. Okay, there's no surface like these did that face downwards, and that's how you correct a life cast and avoid undercuts. So basically, one way that you can look at it is that if you look down on something, so if you look perfectly, let me try and get that perfectly straight with the camera. If we look down on there, there's areas that we can't see. We can't see every part of the surface. Okay, there's areas here where if I put my finger here, you're missing the tip of my finger, you can't see it. You know, here you can see all of my finger. As soon as it goes here, that's how much of an undercut we've got. And that is potentially going to lock us in. Same as here, you can't see under there. So there's some up under the nostril in here that could cause an undercut. So anything that you can't see is an undercut. So when you're looking down on a surface, if you want to know if there's any undercuts, if you can see every single part of that surface looking directly down on it, there are no undercuts. That's not the case here. We've also got a slight undercut here on the top of the head where it kind of curves around and under. So we're going to fix all of that, and that's what this particular video is about, how to correct your life cast. So I'm going to assume if you're doing this with an ultracal or a plaster face, we'll just assume that you've already coated it with some crystal clear. And so for the stuff on the actual face itself, I'm going to use oil clay, and then for the stuff around the base, I'm going to use water clay just because it's cheaper and it's easier to smooth out, and really it doesn't make any difference. So first up, I'm going to just get some little bits of clay, and I'm just going to basically fill in any of these undercuts. So you basically just make little snakes and kind of make sure there's no areas here that are still got, see how it's still dipping in around here, so we want to get rid of that. And really, it makes no difference what you're going to be moulding this out of. You can do it out of anything, and the process is the same. A corrected life cast is a corrected life cast. And sometimes your life casts, you'll want to do corrected life casts, but you're also going to want to have other elements involved in them. For example, this here is a corrected life cast. So if you look at that, it's pretty much exactly what we're going to be doing today. You can see that I got rid of it's the same face. This is the same face that we're doing. It's taken from the same life cast. But if you look down on it, you can see every plane on that. There's not going to be anywhere that has undercuts. I did take a little bit of that thing away on the really pointy deep part here. I got rid of the line of the eyes. But one very noticeable difference is the big ball of clay on the chin. I mean, sorry, on the nose. Big ball of clay on the nose. And what that does is that it creates a receiver or a hole on the inside of a prosthetic. And what that does, this is for a Grinch, it allows us to put holes here, and then that allows airflow around the nose. So that's also a correction that we made to that life cast to enable us to have the ability to allow the air to flow around the nostrils and up and out the sculpted holes. And it's much the same on Who Noses, and much the same on anything like that where you're going to be covering your nose up, and so say the nostrils are sculpted up here. Now we've got a ball of clay here, and we can sculpt right down to that, so now we've got an air passage. So we're not going to be covering that kind of correction, we're just covering just undercuts in this video. But there are other things as well. I've got one life cast that has kind of built up sections over the eyes here, like a ball over the eyes, and the matrix mold I'm going to show you that I've already made in the next video actually is one that I made for those types of sculpts. And that's typically if you're wanting to have something where you're sculpting right over the eyes, and you still want to have a little bit of space so that their natural eye can open and close without having the foam right against the eye. So you sculpt a little bit here, and then you can sculpt over the top and just make some little holes for them to see out of it. It's much more comfortable for the actor. They can actually see out of the holes. Still feel that that's kind of curving down and under a little bit, so I'm just going to pop a tiny bit more. Sometimes you can get, if they've got a nose that's broken and it bumps out and goes back in, you need to be aware of that. Sometimes the nose is really narrow up here in the tear duct area, and it can create an undercut. Every face is different. You're going to have to examine the face you got and make sure that that you notice any undercuts, because I have had many heartbreaks from not doing it, from not getting rid of my undercuts effectively. Now, I don't want to totally fill the lips in. I don't want to just fill it, because I do want to be able to maybe sculpt so that it just crests the edge of the lip. So I'm going to leave it like that, and I'm just going to get our sculpting tool. Now, I noticed that this got a little bump in there when we did the life cast, so I'm just going to go ahead and just clean up the life cast a little bit. If there's any areas that may be distorted, there's a weird little dent there, I'll just fix that. It's a good time to just take the opportunity to do any cleanup that you need to do on your life cast. So and then I'm going to be moulding this out of a silicone so that I'll be able to just pull as many as I want out of this mould, so I won't have to go through this process again. My apologies if I looked a little haggard at the beginning of this. I literally got back from a week and a half over in Hong Kong 12 hours ago, so I'm still quite jet lagged, and I'm going to be tired for the next couple of weeks, and then I turn around and head back again for 3 months. So I'm trying to get as many of these videos done as I can before I leave, so that for the 3 months that I'm there, I've got material to be able to share with you guys. As of shooting this, I've got the next probably 5 months worth of videos already shot and edited, everything up to running foam latex, which I still have a little bit of work to do on. And then when I get back from Hong Kong in November, I've got to pack up my studio, and I'm relocating to Los Angeles, so may not have a studio for a little bit to be able to make these tutorials in. So got to make sure I've got plenty of stuff for you guys to be able to watch and learn from while I'm without somewhere to work. Just a tiny bit of water on my finger, just kind of smooth that out. For smoothing, like this type of smoothing, I like water better than alcohol. Well, alcohol certainly has its place, just because this is oil-based clay, it doesn't dissolve the clay, whereas alcohol will actually dissolve some of the clay and make a bit of a slurry, which can fill in some of your detail in your life cast, which I'm not wanting to do right now. Make sure that everything's nice and smooth. Just use one of these little flat fellas here, because I don't want to get rid of my nostril altogether. I just want to get rid of the undercut, so I still want to be able to see that there's a nostril there. So just want to be able to see the edge of that nostril, so that if we're having to sculpt the nose, we can kind of run it to the edge of the nostril. I think we're in good shape. And I'm going to hit that just right in those corners, looking down on it. I'm pretty sure there's not much of a undercut there, but going to be better safe than sorry. So I'm going to call that done for the face. Now we just need to clay in the rest of it. Just going to get some water clay and we'll be right back. Just going to grab some clay and start kind of smushing it on. Going to take our kidney and just kind of finish this all down. a damp sponge. Just finish it down. You'll notice that we put it flat on the bottom, which is much the same as just taking that other, when we did the core, and we ground it flat on the bottom so that it could stand on the sculpting stand. This is much the same, except it just does it at this level so that every one that we pull out will automatically just inherently have a flat base on it. I'm just going to put like a very simple sponge texture to this. You can leave it very smooth, but I don't like having the sponge marks all in it. I'd rather have it a little more of a blend texture with the actual life cast of the face. And we can just look down on it and make sure that we can see every single part of the surface, which now we can. So that's done. All that remains is to give it a coat of crystal clear. And clean up the baseboard first. Okay. Okay, so from here we can either mold it in alginate and then, you know, take a pull out of it, which is good for a one-time duplication. We can mold it in silicone, which is what we're going to do, so that we can then use it sort of over and over. There's other options we can do if we're wanting to, which I'm not going to today, but we can certainly put a flange around it with some keys. That would make it easy to sculpt on, and then, you know, then we'd have our keys already built into the flange. We can do that if we wanted, but again, I'm not going to do that for this one. And once that dries, then we're good to start moulding it with our matrix mold.